cloud. Thank you. All right. Once again, pulling it in. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Sound Design and Synthesis Workshop hosted by myself, Troy Jansen, and Binary Theater Company. So throughout this, it's going to be split into two parts. First of all, I'm going to go through kind of everything you would do approaching to do a basic sound design for a stage play. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about analog synthesis and modular and how to incorporate that kind of thing into a stage play. Okay, everyone's turned their cameras off, and now I'm nervous. Thanks, guys. Um, so I'm going to share my screen, and you can all give me thumbs. Oh, now they're back. Cool. You can all give me thumbs up or whatever when you can see it. Hopefully. Da-da-da. Everybody see all this stuff? So when you are appointed a sound designer for a play, you are going to be working before you even start any work, pulling content or designing. You're going to be working closely with the director or assistant director on the general kind of idea of the show, what the sound's going to be like, and eventually you will come to develop a cue list. Now, this is a mock one from a play called Eurydice by Sarah Rule. There's a couple of pieces of pertinent information you want to look through on this list, and obviously by the time you've come up with a rough one, you'll know it pretty well, but you have act and scene and page. This is so you can locate your cues or pieces of sound that are going to be in the play within the script. You have what's called the trigger, which is what happens on stage or what the character says that triggers the sound to be played or fired. Again, I'm going to be throwing around a lot of sound terminology, so if anyone needs clarification, please feel free to ask a question or stop me. The description is basically what the sound is going to be. It's better to be as more descriptive here than less descriptive, because if someone else needs to take on this work, you want them to more accurately be able to find what the sound should be. Source/location, this is more on the technical side, and if you're working on a basic theater like ours, most chances are you won't need to necessarily worry about this kind of stuff starting out, but it is just which speaker essentially is you want to play the sound. So for this demonstration, I have constructed a far simpler cue list. Hopefully everyone can see this one too. Yeah. For a play called The Really Cool Play in Space, which is totally a real show and not one that I made up. So we have a couple of cues here and some triggers to go with it, and I'm going to walk through how we would source these sounds and how we would program them into softwares that I'm going to use and show you. So a quick rundown, we have pre-show music, we have some ocean sounds, some spooky ambient tones, some computer blips and bloops, some footsteps, and some radio chatter. So these are going to be the sounds that we're going to try to work with. I'm going to pull them, I'm going to use found sounds and stuff, I'm going to source them from the internet as you would do for our first part. And then I'm going to show you how I would do this on hardware, approaching with all of this. So, first of all, I'm going to show you guys the software that are your best friends in sound design. Both of these are free softwares you can get as students. Reaper is technically not a free software, but you can evaluate it for as long as you like and pay for it eventually, which is what I plan on doing when I'm not a college student. But Reaper is where we're going to do the bulk of our audio editing. It is what's called a DAW, or Digital Audio Workstation. You can manipulate audio in all kinds of ways. You can edit it, you can create music, you can build samples, basically anything to process audio you can do in a DAW. And Reaper is just the one that I use. There are tons out there that go from free to thousands of dollars, everything under the sun to fit your style that you'll eventually adopt as a producer and sound designer. Okay, the next one that we're going to work with is called QLab, and this is what's actually used in the theater in a playback environment. So when the show's going on, there is a soundboard operator operating this system with a computer in conjunction with the theater systems that's actually going to be playing the sounds. So I will show you how some of these work. QLab is very simple. If you don't want to be the board op for a show, you can trade someone to be the board op in like half an hour, and hopefully they'll be good at it. But basically, these are cues I've programmed. These ones correspond with the longer cue list for Eurydice that I showed you earlier. People that took Dan's class will recognize this because that's what it's from. And I'm mousing through or selecting through these presets with my arrow keys. Oh, by the way, quick note, I use Mac for everything, and QLab only works on Mac right now, unfortunately, but it is kind of an industry standard, so if it's something you want to get into, it is something you're going to need, which is unfortunate. But basically, I can select a cue I want, I can hit spacebar, and the sound will play. Let me make this a little louder for you guys. Hopefully you can hear that. You can all hear the music that's playing from this one. Cool. And then if I want to stop it, I can press escape. And the main things you're going to want to know how to program at first with QLab, if you're just getting started, bare minimum, is the audio cues themselves and the fades. And that's what most of this list is. So you have the sound, the music you want to play during the scene, basic wedding music, right? And then when you want the music to go down, you will trigger this cue, which after it plays for a certain duration here, it'll bring the music down so the actors can, say, speak over it. And then when you want to stop the music, you trigger the next cue, which targets that one, and after a certain amount of time, this one's a rather long fade out, but it will stop the music entirely. Let's exit out of that quickly. So now that we've covered the software, let's go through how we want to get our sound or our music, or whatever you want to put in there. So let's start off with this cue, the ocean sounds. Let's say we want to find some ocean sounds for when the character Hans says, "Look, an ocean." Obviously the director wants some ocean sounds to play here. So this is stuff I'm going to go over later, but a website I like to use is called freesound.org, and it is, as it sounds, a website where you can get free sounds. And they're all completely free. You do have to make an account, but they don't ask for a credit card. There's no charges or anything. It's really nice. So we are just going to simply go on and search for some ocean sounds. And as you can see, there are thousands. So in real play, you would peruse through all of these. You'd want to get the one specifically that you wanted, but for the purpose of being brief, I'm going to say this is the ocean sound effect that I want. I'm going to take a quick listen. A little loud, a little harsh, but we can fix that later. So I'm going to go ahead and download it, and hopefully it doesn't take too long. Otherwise, we're going to be sitting here having a nice chat. Okay, 30 seconds. That's not too bad. So while that downloads, I'm going to explain how we start to set up Reaper. So this is what Reaper is going to look like when you just open it up. Actually, it's going to look like this. So the first thing you're going to do is create a track where your audio is going to go. So on Mac, I'm hitting Command T, and that creates a track. So now we have this track, and that's where we're going to edit our audio. Now it's going to, sorry about that, it does this really annoying thing where it will automatically play it after I've downloaded it. So I'm going to go into my downloads. I'm going to go over here. The sound should be cool. And I'm going to grab that, and we are simply going to, oops. I'm going to go over here to where Reaper is, and it's as simple as clicking and dragging. Cool. So now we can see that our sound is in here. I'm going to turn this down a little bit so it doesn't blast you guys' ears. We're going to click on it, and we're going to hear our nice, calming ocean sound. So that's a little bit loud, obviously. Jeez. And again, some of this is too loud because it's coming through my monitors here. What you're going to want to look at is your little audio meters here. So we don't want that long of an ocean sound. So I'm going to zoom out, and I'm going to say this is the little part over here that we want. We're going to zoom in, and I did that. I just grabbed the end of the track, and I clicked on it, and I dragged it. And this cuts it to whatever length you want. Now we have a shorter selection of audio. That's a nice ocean sound. And it sounds to be a good volume. And if we wanted to fade it in, we can take the corner here and drag it, and this will create an envelope of the volume going up, so it doesn't get to its full volume till a little bit after the sound. This is good for bringing in a track in a song, but since we're using QLab and we want to automate these fades, we're going to leave it as it is. So really quickly, we're going to click on it and we're going to export it so we can put it in QLab. So we're going to do Reaper, oh geez, I know what I'm doing, I swear. Render, going to click render, and then this little window is going to pop up, and a lot of this is really advanced settings that you don't have to worry about at first. Just set it to a WAV file. MP3 works too. WAV is default. I find it works fine. We're going to name it Ocean Sounds, and we're going to make sure it goes somewhere we can find it. So I'm going to make it go to my desktop, and then we just hit render, and it will quickly render. You see this is a very short sound, so it rendered almost instantly. We're going to close it, and we're going to put Reaper away for now, and we're going to open up a fresh, these were test cues I had in here. Let me just get rid of those real quick. So this is a blank QLab workspace, and now we're going to take our freshly rendered ocean sounds and put them on this desktop, and then we're going to go over here to where these are the different kinds of cues you can use. We're going to scroll up, we're going to click an audio cue. So now this is basically a blank slot where we can put in the audio that we want. So I'm going to drag that in there, and now when I press spacebar on this, you can hear ocean sounds come up. But we want to be able to fade those down at a certain point in the show. So we're going to grab a fade cue and drag it in. And now our fade cue is in here, but you can see it doesn't show anything, which means it doesn't have a target. So to assign this to a target, we're going to need to simply take it and drag it up to the audio. See how it highlights it like that? And then we let go, and now that fade is targeting the ocean sounds. But when we trigger it, nothing is going to happen. That's because we don't have any audio parameters set. So we're going to click on the fade cue. We're going to go to audio levels and say, this is arbitrary right now, but we want to take it down to -12 decibels. So now if we start the ocean sound, it'll play, and then if we want to fade it before the cue is up, we trigger this cue, and now it'll fade out. So that's pretty basic. That's one cue and one fade. Let's quickly grab a little bit longer of a cue. So say pre-show music. So we're going to find our pre-show music that's going to play in the house before the show even starts. And let's just say there's this track that the director really likes right here that they want to be the pre-show music. I'm going to create another audio cue. I'm going to drag this. This is just a brief track I made, and we're going to drag it in there. And to keep things nice and organized, I'm going to, oops, what's going on here? There we go. I'm going to double click on it, and so we know what it is. I'm going to write pre-show music. And as long as we're being organized, there's a problem right now with my numbering system. Basically, our first cue, which let's say our pre-show music is the first cue in our stack. Edit. Come on, where is it? Oh, I can only delete one at a time. Okay, so file, I'm just going to edit this cue, delete this cue, delete this fade. So now this is our pre-show music. And when we start numbering our cues, what we want to do is give the very first cue a number like 30. And this is for two reasons. First off, say this is our only track in the pre-show music right now, but the director later on says, oh, I really like this other track that I want to play when people are walking into the audience. And now, if we need to add another track, and if we had labeled this number 1, and we'd built the rest of our cues after that, we'd have a problem because now we'd have a new number 1 and we need to bump every cue up. And if you have a long cue stack, that's going to be a major nightmare. So by starting with something like 30, you have 29 options to add something in front of it. And that seems like a lot, but I'll show you how we go up when we add our next cue. But before that, I'm going to show you how to automate stuff. So say you have the pre-show that you want to play for a certain amount of time, and then after that amount of time you want the fade to start so it'll get a little bit lower. So we'll take our fade and we will attach it to the pre-show music, and then we're going to take it down to, say, minus 10 dB. Again, you want to play this by ear. When you're really working on an important cue list, you're going to spend a lot of time fine-tuning these things, and I'm going over this very briefly to get the basics down. So we are going to click on a little thing up here, which is called auto follow. So basically what we do here is make sure we have this little upside down pine tree looking symbol, and we are going to say maybe 20 seconds after that this cue has started playing, it's going to trigger the fade. So I'm going to scrub through this a little bit so we get a little closer. So this sound has now been playing for 10 seconds. And you can see here, when this bar completes, the whole soundtrack, the whole track hasn't played, but it just triggered this fade. So now it'll automatically come down after a certain point. And that's a really useful thing to know. So we have that. Okay, I'm going to show you another way to get another one of our cues if, for example, you can't find the exact sound you want on free sounds, because that's going to happen. There's billions of sounds on the internet, and one website's not always going to have the exact one you need. So we're going to go to our trusty friend YouTube over here and say we're looking for some radio chatter sounds. Just going to type it in. Find a shortish one. See, these are all like an hour long, and I don't want to pull that because it'll take forever. So here we go. Here's some basic. This is the sound we want, basically. Now the problem is, you really like the sound, but it's on YouTube, and if anyone's ever tried this, they know you can't just pull the sound off YouTube, right? So we're gonna go a little thing called YouTube to MP3, which is a nifty little tool that lets you do exactly its namesake. You take your YouTube URL, you copy it, you go over here, and you paste it. And it'll check it if this doesn't work with like straight up songs from artists, like, because obviously that's kind of a big copyright deal, so you can't do that. But hopefully something kind of small, it will work. So we can do download, and this will try to trick you into some, like, buying a thing, but just close that tab. Now it's playing because my iTunes automatically opens these sounds, but basically now we have our radio chatter sound, which is taken directly from this YouTube video. So we're going to go back over to Reaper, and if we want to make a new track, we hit Command T again. We take our radio sound, it's going to pull that in there, and if we only want, actually I'm going to show you guys how to do something else in QLab itself. So I'm going to make another audio cue for this radio chatter. I'm going to, oops, that didn't work. There we go. So I'm going to make another audio cue for this radio chatter. And we're going to go to timing and loops. So basically this is just another way you can do the splicing in Reaper. If you just want a quick fix and you don't want to open up your DAW all the way, what you can do is basically the same thing. You're just going to grab this point and select the little bit of audio that you want. And now this cue in QLab is only going to use this tiny little part of the audio, which is another useful trick. And oh, see how this cue automatically went to 30.5? Generally, we don't want to work with decibels or decimals. So I'm going to if this is the next cue on our stack, I'm going to go ahead and number it 40. And there is a setting, I just don't have it configured right now, where it'll auto delete this. It can automatically number up by an interval of 10, which is what I usually have it set to, which is helpful. And this goes for the same thing. If we want to add a cue now in between 30 and 40, if I had numbered this cue 40 or 31, then I have to change everything in the stack going down. So we want to make sure we leave our cue numbers nice and open. So that is kind of a bare bones introduction to how to put cues into QLab, how to get them ready in Reaper, and stuff like that. Does that kind of make sense to everyone? Was that a good explanation? You guys feel like you could pilot a whole show now, knowing what you know? Awesome. Cool. So I am going to kind of dive in with some of the modular synthesis stuff. So real quick, I'm going to show you guys a couple softwares that you can use if you're interested in modular synthesis. So this is a website called modulargrid.com. It's what I use to plan out. If you guys can see my setup over here, this basically what you see on this web page is a virtual representation of my system. So you can pick all the modules. I guess first I should explain what a synthesizer is before I dive into the complicated stuff. So a synthesizer is essentially a device that you can use to create sound. It uses things like oscillators and filters to shape the sound, and it's a musical instrument, although it can be used for much more than that. There are a couple of schools of thought and stuff with synthesis, and again, hardware is scary, and if you're looking to dive in with stuff like this, if you're a musician mayhaps and you play guitar or piano, and you're always curious about stuff like this, you definitely don't have to dive in with physical hardware at first, which is kind of the beautiful thing, because there are tons of virtual instruments and plugins, things that will work directly in Reaper that you can get for free to learn about synthesis. You don't have to go and buy straight away $300 investment and only find out that you don't like it and you want to get rid of it. There are plenty of free plugins. I know of some. If you're really curious, feel free to ask me afterwards. I will hook you up with some of the ones I know and like, but definitely an option. I am talking myself really fast. Give me 1 second here. Stay hydrated, kids. So that's kind of a good entry path. A little bit more about the history in case anyone's interested. I know I am because I'm a kind of nerd. A lot of the stuff was starting to get developed in the 60s. There were kind of two ideologies, you could say, of how to do it with developing electronic instruments, and they're called East Coast and West Coast. On the East Coast was kind of pioneered by a fellow called Dr. Robert Moog, who developed his own system of East Coast synthesis, and that's kind of what I have here, what this kind of heart of my rack is. This is called a Moog Mother 32, and it is essentially a self-contained little synthesizer. It sounds very nice. I'll play you guys a little example track here. This is just a sequence that's patterned in here. And what I'm doing right now is turning up a filter, which is cutting off the high frequencies. See, that's kind of harsh and hard and metallic. And as I filter it down, it gets a little bit softer and nicer. And that's kind of the core tenet of East Coast synthesis, is that you start with a very raw waveform, right? That that sounds okay. It's not inherently musical. But then you can kind of filter it down until you get something kind of nice. And then we can add a little bit of reverb. And then you get kind of a more nice, melodic, beautiful sounding instrument. I mean, either way it works. There's a lot of, obviously, a plethora of musical genres that can utilize a ton of sounds to do different things. But that's kind of the basics of that. And on the other hand, you had, on the West Coast, you had a fellow named Don Buchla, who with his synthesizers, things like the Buchla Music Easel, pioneered what is known as West Coast synthesis. And I have a module up here that's a little bit more West Coast. This is this guy. It's called the Make Noise Tell Harmonic. And it kind of starts by taking a more basic waveform, and then instead of subtracting it down, you do what's called a wave folding, which adds more harmonics on top and gets you a more interesting sound, right? And this is, again, a very basic explanation. There are tons and tons of things to dive into here with the history and the design. But in general, if you're getting into synthesizers, it's good to know that there's East Coast and West Coast, and they're somewhat different sounds. So if you want to look into what you want, what the kind of sounds you would want out of a machine, you would probably want to know which side to start from. Although you can, obviously, if I've done here, as I've done here, is do both. Just reading the chat. Oh, sorry, you guys. Oh, no, I've messed up. I'm sorry. I was trying to read the chat and all of your guys' encouragement. And I have been a buffoon in ending my screen share. So thank you guys for the encouragement. Sorry, whoever I just called out for eating Oreos during the class. So, moving along a little bit. This is obviously a musical instrument. You can create songs and patterns, blah, blah, blah. But how do you use it for sound design? Well, there are a couple of cool tricks that you can do to take this from beyond a basic, musical instrument and kind of create some interesting soundscapes, which is what I like to do. So let's say we want these computer blips and blops, right? I'm sure everyone can picture kind of what I'm talking about here. It's that very sci-fi 60s. If you watch Star Trek, if you watch those early kind of things, there we go, computer blips. It's the very stereotypical sci-fi, like computer talking. Like this is, the voice of HAL 9000. This is all the flashing lights. And I'm just playing samples here from Freesound. None of these are quite what I'm exactly thinking about. There, that's kind of close. That bloop, 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 bloop. It's random. It's kind of synonymous. It's what people think of when they think, ooh, spooky alien computers, right? So I'm going to show you guys how to do it on a hardware synthesizer. So because you can't see the fine detail over here, I'm going to point to which modules I'm using. So basically, this guy is called the Dreadbox Dystopia, and this output here can create a random voltage from what's called a sample and hold, which is a complicated electronic blah 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 for it just makes random voltages. These things typically range from 0 to 10 volts, so it's nothing that's going to electrocute you. I'm not going to die touching this thing. But basically, it's not digital, there are digital synthesizers, and this is all analog stuff, which means they talk to each other via varying voltages. And one of the things is the way it knows which note to play is based on the incoming voltage from this keyboard. So this keyboard via MIDI sends out a voltage which is telling this voice, this synthesizer, what note it should play. So middle C, it's not tuned exactly right, but there you go. So what I'm going to do instead is take a random voltage out of this guy, and we are going to send that into what's called volts per octave, which is where it tracks the note. So when I turn this on, that's a little too fast, but as we turn the rate of this down, you see we start to get those nice computerized bleeps. So that's kind of a nice... This is what the robot space 60s computer would sound like. I'm going to turn that down real quick. And if I do a different kind of trick where I can actually use the filter, which is what subtracts the sound, if I crank it up enough, it will actually play itself like a tone. Hang on. Where is it? There we go. And I think this sounds a little bit nicer for the computerized voice. You guys hear that okay? Yeah? Cool, thank you. So that's what I like. This is kind of the computerized blippy bloopy sound that I like. And now, in order to get it from my system, and I'm just hearing this live, I'm going to give it a second to load. I'm going to clear these tracks. And you do need a piece of hardware to do this. You need something called an audio interface, which takes any audio signal. If you record guitar, if you play any instrument at home and you want to record it, and not just using your laptop's crappy microphone, you want a good audio interface to record the sound going into your computer. You don't have to break the bank on it. I have a crappy Behringer one, ran me like 60 bucks. But again, it's an investment. It's a tool that I use. So if you want to do this kind of stuff, it's definitely worth investing in. So I'm going to make a new track. So we get rid of that. And basically, I'm going to press this little red button, which means record arm, which means instead of drag, I'm not going to just drag some audio in here. It's listening to the input I have plugged in. Right now it's listening to my microphone because that's also plugged into my audio interface. But I'm going to switch it to the correct channel, and this will vary based on your interface. And now, when I press a button or listen to the sound, I'm going to turn it off on my monitors. So right now the only thing listening to this sound is bump this a little bit, is the DAW. Is Reaper. So right now Reaper is listening to the sound that the modular is making. General rule of thumb, you watch this meter, you want to get it close to -18, -6. You generally want it louder so you can turn it down, because if you record a quieter sound and you boost it up, it's going to get fuzzy and noisy and not going to sound as good. So I'm going to press Z to set my cursor back at the beginning, and I'm going to press R, and that's going to start a recording of this sound. So say I want it for 6 seconds. Now I'm going to turn my monitors back on. Oops, a little loud, sorry. So now this isn't making any noise. I'm just going to play back what we just heard. So now I have the thing I made on the synthesizer as an audio file in my DAW. And from that point, you just repeat the same process. You go File, Render, Computer Blips, blips, and you just render it. And this is a short file. Yeah, it's done. It goes super fast. When you're rendering longer things, podcasts, pre-recorded radio shows of broadcast theater pieces, stay tuned for if it's any consolation from Binary Theater Company. It'll take a little bit longer to render, but that is expected. If anyone's ever done any video editing, it's the same thing. Longer file, longer render. So we have that. Let's real quick make one more cue from our little cue list here. So let's say we want these booming footsteps, and we can't find a sound that we like from our any online or anything. So I'm going to take this little module, this little guy with the gold circle right here. This is called Ears by Mutable Instruments, and it is a contact microphone. So it's basically a very primitive microphone set inside of here. So I'm going to take the output of this, I'm going to turn it up, and you can hear me tapping on it. That's just me very gently tapping on this little microphone surface pad, and you can hear I get, it's good for ASMR too. So yeah, so I'm going to use that to emulate our footsteps. So if I, hang on, and again you can hear me fiddling with all the knobs, and it's not super pleasant, so I apologize. But if you kind of sounds like footsteps approaching, right? We can do one more and make it a little more ominous by taking it. And when I'm pulling these cables out, I'm just routing the signals around. So I'm taking the output of this module and I'm just plugging it down here. This is the input or the output of my synth that's going to the audio interface and my monitors. But first, I'm going to plug it into this module, which is called Clouds by Mutable Instruments, which does a lot of things that are very complicated. But I also can be a nice reverb, which is an audio effect that makes things sound more open and airy and pleasant, as if it was being recorded in like a cave or a large room. So here's my tapping sound again, and I'm going to slowly bring up the reverb. It gets a little bit more ominous, right? It gets a little bit more, shady figure following you through town that you don't want in the middle of the night. And it gets faster. It's coming up on you. So real quick, I'm sure you all know the drill by now. I'm just going to record that. And if I generally don't want the audio to start right at the beginning of the clip, so I'm going to press record before I start tapping, which is going to give me a little bit of a buffer zone that makes sure I get all of the audio I record, and I can just trim that out later. So I'm going to hit record. It's going, and then I'm going to try to get a couple different variations. And call that good. So now I can scrub through all the different footsteps I just recorded. Turn it up a little bit. I recorded this kind of quiet, so I'd probably do another take if I was doing this. Or my volume's just down there. Either one. But yeah, so now I have some eerie booming footsteps that weren't pulled from any audio library. They were synthesized right here from me tapping on a little piece of metal. Oops, still scratchy and loud. So that's a very basic kind of approach on how I've used some of my modules to create some interesting sound effects. And if you look at, again, if you're interested, Modular Grid is a great resource. It shows tons and tons of Eurorack modules. This format of modular synthesis is called Eurorack. It just defines how tall all the modulars are that fit into your case. In this website, you can look at, there's literally thousands and thousands from different manufacturers all over. There are modules that make sounds. There are modules that amplify sounds, that filter. There are modules that synthesize cat sounds. So if you want your entire system to sound like 36 cats singing in a choir, you could very well do that, and I want to, but it's expensive to get all those cats. But yeah, I love this system. I love this format. I think it's one of the coolest instruments ever invented that I've ever had the pleasure of working with. There's just so many possibilities. You can set it up to do live techno, ambient, generative music that plays itself. It's super, super creative, and I love it. And applying it to sound design, specifically for the theater, I think is a super cool thing that I'm honored to be able to do with the resources I have. And it's super cool. And if you, again, going on the track of getting into it, there's another software I want to briefly mention called VCV Rack, which Modular Grid, you can look at modules, you can plan your rack, but none of these modules, they're just pictures, right? This is just a little JPEG of the module that I'm dragging around on my screen. If you actually want to, oops, I'm not logged in, so it's going to get mad at me. If you want to hear what these modules sound like without buying a case and the power supply and the cables and all that, you can go onto VCV Rack, which has not every single module, but a lot of them, a lot of things. You can see here's some stuff from Mutable Instruments, which is what a lot of my modules are, and there's more than this, but you can sign up, you download the software, you can play with modules and actually hear how they sound, experiment with them. And if you were doing the sound design for a play and you're tired of stock options, you don't want all those cheesy sound effects, and you don't have any hardware equipment, this is totally a viable way. You can record out of it. It'll sound great. That you can create some interest, and some different new things into theater, which I think is super innovative, super cool, and I hope at some point some of you get to try it. So yeah, that's everything from me. I know that was quick. I know it was concise. I'm sure all of you know me and have my email, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. I live and breathe this stuff. And yeah, does anyone have any questions, comments, feedback, concern, criticism? Get the hell out of here, we're tired. Any of that? I'm opening it up to you guys for whatever you want. If any of you are still there and not just off eating Oreos while you let me talk for 40 minutes.
I have questions.
Yeah.
So the converter site you used, I've used it before and it gave me a virus and pop-up ads, and I was wondering if that happened to your computer too.
The YouTube to MP3?
Yeah.
Yeah, so what it does and how I get around it, which I totally understand where you're coming from. Um, Let me show you. What it will do, and again, I'm sure there are other softwares that won't mess with it like this, but this is the only one that I've found that's consistently worked through all the time I've done this.
Mhm.
So you insert your link and you click convert, and after you hit download, once it's checked, of course now it's taking longer. But basically, when you hit download, it'll start the download, but it'll open up another tab on your browser. And basically, you don't want to click on any. Oh, that's just the sound popping up. But basically, this is the tab you want. This is the original tab you had. As soon as you hit download, it'll open up this tab, which is all fake, and don't touch any of this stuff, basically. So you just close that tab and you go back to this one. And I've done that every time. I've never gotten a virus or anything.
Okay. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course.
Also, I was wondering about like copyright laws for pulling things off of YouTube and like how much of that time segment can you use without being copyrighted?
It's kind of a finicky game. Obviously, if I was designing on Broadway or a Lort theater, I wouldn't use anything off of YouTube. And in that case, you will probably have a budget to work on for um, like buying sound libraries. But obviously, that doesn't answer your question. Typically, if something's like super flagged and you get in a lot of trouble, this website will stop it. But if it's something like the video I pulled, which was radio chatter on a channel from a video game from 1993, people
Mhm.
generally won't care. Again, I'm not endorsing anything like that, but it's really kind of play it by ear. The more local you are on the theater side, the more generally acceptable it is. But typically, working in a larger environment, a more professional environment, you want to stick to sound libraries that you can buy, artists you can credit, and stuff like that.
Thank you.
Yeah, cool. Are there any questions in the chat that I have missed? Stop the share so you guys don't see the chat again. Oh, okay. Cody has a converter. YouTube. Okay. Oh, do I have any stuff I could share with you guys? Um, yeah, I could find something. Um, I have a website that is not currently up because it makes you pay more money than I have. So once I have my actual website up, you guys can check that out. Yeah, let me pull some stuff. Are you asking Max, more like musical stuff or more like sound design stuff? It's the craziest sound I've made. um, drop my SoundCloud and shit. I actually just made a SoundCloud, um, much to my own chagrin. But yeah, let me find. I will show you guys something I made for the Crucible. R.I.P. Christmas sound. Content. Okay, here is a little piece I made for the Crucible. Hang on, let me throw it into Reaper so y'all can hear it. Hang on, hang on, hang on. Anybody hear it? It's clipping, it's a little loud. Yeah. So that goes on for a little bit. It's a transition piece. But yeah, it's something I made for the Crucible. Again, RIP. A vibe. Thank you. Thank you very much. It's the craziest sound I've ever made. This thing you will get. I am a night owl, and I will, when I can't sleep, come up and turn this thing on. And does anyone else have like super random, like a lot of creativity when they're really tired in the dead of night? Because is that just me? But yeah, you can. The cool thing about this instrument is how interconnected it is, and the more pieces and the more little modules you connect together, the weirder like stuff can get. Okay, good. I'm glad alone. Glad I'm not alone. I can talk. I swear. I got. Yeah. I'm just stuttering now. Cool. But yeah, you get like even just turning a couple of knobs. I'll show you. Wait, why can't I? Oh, why can't I hear anything? Well, that's awkward. Oh, right. Not plugged in. Every time. It's because it's not plugged. There we go. Now it works. See, like even that, I don't know why it's making that sound. And that in itself is pretty cool. Another cool thing about synthesizers is they're good at emulating other instruments. So like if you want a trumpet sound, but you can't find a plugin that emulates a nice trumpet, you can tweak your parameters, and in some ranges, like it doesn't work too great. Like that sounds like an electronic instrument. But down here, sounds like, someone blowing a trumpet or a tuba, right? Which is pretty cool. But yeah, I spoke briefly about generative music, which is a thing some people do on these kind of systems where you set a certain amount of parameters, and everything will kind of modulate each other. And you can start with like a basic sequence, which is just, a couple of notes played in order. And then you can patch things into each other. And if I do it right... Oh, hang on. There we go. It'll start... Can you all still hear it okay? A little bit? Yeah, it'll start doing its own kind of thing. And you just kind of sit back. And you tweak knobs every now and then. But it kind of... Like, I'm not actively playing this instrument. I'm not actively playing this keyboard. But I can feed it a melody. And I can tweak the parameters a little bit at a time. And it'll change. So... I think that's pretty cool. I think the craziest sound I've ever made lies somewhere in that category. So thank you for that question. But yeah, thank you guys for listening. I know this is my first time teaching any. I guess here, let me stop the recording. Thanks for watching, everybody.